Hello, my name is Gabriel Dansero, and I read the poem "O Captain, My Captain" by Walt Whitman. So, before we get into the poem, I want to discuss who Walt Whitman was. In Walt Whitman's early life, Walt Whitman was born in Long Island, New York in the year 1819. He was born to a farming family with very little education. His mother, Louisa van Vessler, had an ancestry of mainly Dutch, and Walt's father, Walter Whitman, was English descent. And when Walt was born, much of the Whitman family farmland had been greatly damaged. And so his father picked up carpentering. To find work, the Whitman family at this point included 9 children, moved to Brooklyn in 1823. At 12 years old, Walt worked in the printing trade. He went to school in Long Island to become a journalist. When he was just 23 years old, he edited a New York newspaper. In 1846, he became the editor of the Brooklyn Daily Eagle, but was terminated 2 years later in 1848. So during the Civil War, Whitman spent lots of time in the camp where his brother was at when he was injured. This is where Whitman spoke with much of the soldiers during this time period, and he would give gifts to both the Union soldiers and the Confederates. And in 1865, Whitman began his poetry on the Civil War. This poem included a poem titled Drum Taps. This became very popular for its disturbing and sad depiction of the war with great detail, and he continued his poems on this topic, and much of his most famous poems were created on this. In Walt Whitman's later life, in in 1867, Whitman published a revision of his book Leaves of Grass, which contained a collection of some of his most popular poems from his earlier career and also throughout the Civil War. And this book became very successful for its time, and it was not all great though during his later life, as in 1873, due to a stroke, Whitman became partially paralyzed, and he was able to partially recover in a shorter time, but it took a lot longer for him to fully recover from this. And and also during that time period, he lost his mother, which which made him he which caused him to move in with his brother in Camden. He continued to work in peace there. He wrote a biography on himself, and as well as an 8th edition of Leaves of Grass. But in the year 1892, at the age of 72, Walt Whitman passed away. So some context on the poem. So this poem was written by Whitman as an elegy for President Abraham Lincoln after he was assassinated in 1865. So, "O Captain, My Captain" was written to honor him and commemorate what he had done for the country. And with his great leadership during the Civil War, and since this was very shortly after this, even the Civil War, it was very shortly after. So let's begin with the first section of this poem, "O Captain, My Captain." "O Captain, my Captain, our fearful trip is done. The ship was weathered every rack, the prize we sought is won. The port is near, the bells I hear, all exulting, while follow eyes the steady keel, the vessel grim and daring. But oh heart, 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 oh bleeding drops of red, where on the deck my captain lies, fallen cold and dead." So one literary device that is pretty big in this poem entirely, but it begins in this section of the poem, is the extended metaphor of captain, which is which is basically referring to Abraham Lincoln as the captain of the ship. which may it doesn't it may be like the ship is like the country. In this poem, there is a lot of repetition, like through the first line of the second half of this section, where he repeats heart, heart, heart. This really is, and also, oh captain, my captain, he repeats that a lot during this poem. And at the beginning and during this part, there's a lot of imagery of death, like when he says, oh, the bleeding drops of red, where on the deck my captain lies, fallen cold and dead. This gives it the tone. This also kind of, this is all like description of death and kind of lifelessness. So now we get to the middle section. Oh, captain, my captain, rise up and hear the bells. Rise up for your flag, for the flag is flung. For you the bugle trills. For you bouquets and ribbon wreaths. For you the shores a crowding. For you they call the swaying mast, their eager faces turning. Here, captain, dear father, this arm beneath your head is some dream that on the deck you've fallen cold and dead. So in the beginning of this section, Whitman uses anaphora when he repeats, "Oh captain, my captain." As I mentioned before, he uses this to begin pretty much all the previous two sections of the poem. And this was and is used throughout the poem, as I mentioned before. It is meant to mimic the calls. This could also be a little bit of diction, as it is used to mimic the calls that a crewmate may make to the captain of a ship. And there was another example of strong imagery in this part when Whitman says, rise up, for you the flag is flung, for you the bugle trills, for you the bouquets and ribboned wreaths, for you the shores are crowding. These are all examples of ways a person can be honored on their arrival back from a voyage. The flag is a representation of country pride. And the bugle often used to represent infantrymen, is mentioned. This demonstrates a cheerful scene of pride. But on the second half of this section of the poem, there's a tone shift. The tone shifts to a very somber one. When Whitman wrote, "Here, captain, dear father, this arm beneath your head is some dream that on the deck you've fallen cold and dead." This is a sharp change from dock full of life to one full of emptiness and death. So now we get to the final section of this poem. So, my captain does not answer. His lips are pale and still. My father does not feel my arm. He has no pulse nor will. The ship is anchored safe and sound, its voyage close and done. From fearful trip, the victor ship comes in with object won. Exult, all shores, and ring all bells, but I with mournful tread walk the deck, my captain lies, fallen cold and dead. So some things I noticed from this part of the poem is, in this section, Whitman stops using the anaphora that I mentioned previously about the middle section of, he previously started all parts with, "Oh captain, my captain," but now he does not. This may be a sign of acceptance that the president, or in the poem, the captain has passed and the crewmate has kind of given up on trying to get his attention. So also another thing that I noticed was Whitman uses personification and also symbolism to describe the ship and the voyage. The ship is one example is that defines this is the quote, "The ship is anchored safe and sound, its voyage close and done. From fearful trip, the victor ship comes in with the object won." Whitman gives a lot of human-like refers to the ship as almost like human like characteristics, and almost describes it as a person. But he also uses the ship as a symbol. The ship's voyage is a symbol of the president's successful of President Lincoln's successful tenure as president, and how he can now rest in honor, like the boat rests at the dock, its voyage finished. So some things that stood out to me was the use of anaphora, like starting out all sections with "Oh Captain, my Captain." It was, and then like at the end he stopped using that. I thought that was kind of interesting. I also found his um his use of the symbolism of the ship very interesting, because I've I wouldn't have thought of that type of um like symbol for presidency. I thought that was interesting. And also his imagery on death is very shocking and descriptive. And I thought that was kind of I thought that was very odd for I thought that was very odd for a to meant to honor the president. I thought that was kind of interesting.